You're listening to episode 254 of The Secular Buddhist. Welcome to The Secular Buddhist. I'm Ted Meissner. The Secular Buddhist is the official podcast of the Secular Buddhist Association, a grassroots-driven effort to answer the needs of secular teaching and practice for contemporary society. The podcast has interviews and roundtable discussions pertaining to engaged Buddhist training and practice, and the SBA website has show notes for each episode along with resource materials. Though the podcast focuses on core practices from a secular viewpoint, more traditional teachings are welcome and openly discussed. Loch Kelly joins us to speak about his book, Shift into Freedom, The Science and Practice of Open-Hearted Awareness. Hi everyone. Before we begin today's episode, I would like to mention that this podcast and the supporting website, discussion forums, and our live online practice circle and other services provided by the Secular Buddhist Association are supported by you. If you find this episode or any other offerings helpful to you in some way, I ask that you take a moment and visit secularbuddhism.org and click on the Contributions button. There are many ways you can help which are listed on that page, and if you make a donation, it's tax-deductible and it helps ensure the SBA is able to continue the exploration of secular Buddhism. Thank you. We're glad to have you join us in the conversation. Imagine you've been through a pretty rough time in your life, with a series of tragic losses and changes, all in a short amount of time. Sound familiar? Many people have had that unfortunate experience, and sometimes there's another experience which profoundly shifts our state of mind to something more equanimous. But what is that? Our curiosity may lead us into realms of spiritual answers from religious doctrine, but more and more these explorations are also leading to scientific discovery in the company of our contemplative practice. Loch Kelly is an educator, consultant, and leader in the field of meditation and psychotherapy who is asked to teach meditation by Mingyur Rinpoche and Adyashanti. The founder of the Open-Hearted Awareness Institute, he is an emerging voice in modernizing meditation, social outreach, and collaborating with neuroscientists to study how awareness training can enhance well-being. So sit back, relax, and have a nice Purple Passion Punch. Our guest today is Loch Kelly. Loch, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Ted. Great to be here.
Very glad to have you with us. So let's jump right into just having you tell us about your background.
Sure. I was just, an average American kid, bumbling along in life, and got through high school. And when I went to college, my sophomore year, all of a sudden there were some big changes all in a row. So the first one was that my father developed brain cancer, and it was about a year of him going through surgery. And then sophomore year, he eventually passed away in August, the week before I went to my sophomore year. And then my best friend from college died in a car accident that January. And then my grandmother, who had lived with us, passed away within another couple months. And so that spring semester, I was, very grief stricken. I was full of emotion and tried to talk to my friends, but very few of them, if any, had really been through anything like this at that point. And, went to the counselors and at school and didn't feel like I was really getting what I needed. So one evening, as I walked out of the library, it just felt like this heavy weight on my head and my body. And there was like a dialogue within me that, one part of me said, I don't know if I can take this any longer. And I kind of turned around and kind of looked for what that was. Where's that coming from? And somehow that turning around of my awareness continued almost as if there was no back to my head. And it felt like I opened up my awareness back behind me all the way up into the sky. And it was a beautiful, clear kind of winter night. And it just felt like my whole sense of being this small sense of self just opened, and I felt a support from just what felt like the universe or space or another dimension of my own consciousness, which was now available. And what that did is it lifted this kind of feeling of being overwhelmed, and it gave me a kind of sense of peace. And I started laughing and crying at the same time, and was able, to kind of stay in that, or that stayed with me for a few weeks, mostly. And then, the feelings came back and the grief continued, but there was another dimension of consciousness that I accessed, which was quite remarkable. And that was really the beginning of my curiosity about what is this? How did that happen? Who's talked about this before? Were there anybody there on campus? Not really. But then I started digging in books and reading about different experiences. I read William James' Variety of Religious Experience, and he was talking about psychological experiences of people who had had this in many different professions and areas of their lives. And so that led me to explore meditation and other things like that.
So how did that progress then? What was your first encounter with meditation, and what kind was it?
Yeah, I had actually started to do Zen meditation right after that. So I went up to visit the Rochester Zen Center, a teacher named Philip Kaplew, who wrote a book, Three Pillars of Zen.
Yeah, it's my first Zen book, actually.
Oh, is that right? Okay, yeah. Yeah, and I had found that book. It seemed to be talking to me. It was fairly close to my college, so I went up there for a week retreat, and was able to start playing with meditation as a route to return or to support or to kind of access that consciousness which had come unintentionally originally.
So from there, you've had a practice going, and then in your life professionally, where did things go? What progressed from there?
So I was in college, so I continued to, go through college and play with different meditations. I tried TM. I went and did, some other kinds of visualization practices. And I found that one thing was actually doing sports, that I was able to kind of access this. I was on college teams, and I started playing with this thing that I heard on TV, which was a sports announcer saying he's got eyes in the back of his head. And I kind of thought, oh, that's kind of like what it felt like. Let me see if I can do that. And I literally, like, while I was playing this game, I played ice hockey goalie and I played lacrosse, and I would open my field of vision up all the way so it felt like it was a panoramic kind of awareness. And when I did, I found I dropped into my body and I felt like a cat, so that if somebody shot a puck, I just remained in this kind of confidence, and all of a sudden my hand would, shoot out, almost knowing without knowing, and trusting without thinking. And I would, was able to kind of find a way to kind of get in a flow state.
Handy for a goalie to not have cognitive processing getting in the way of reflexes.
So it was a good training to really do that kind of practice. But then I ended up going off to graduate school, and I was interested in psychology and meditation. So I went to a kind of joint degree program at Columbia University in social work and comparative religions. And then my first year, I went off on a fellowship to Sri Lanka, spent 9 months doing Vipassana, doing Theravada insight meditation, and went on 21-day retreat, two 10-day retreats, a few weekend retreats, studied in a university there, as well as stayed in a monastery for some of those retreats. And then went up through India, met the Dalai Lama, and then off to Nepal, where I met a teacher called Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche, who was teaching Dzogchen, which is kind of a direct practice, Tibetan direct recognition into your nature of mind. And when he gave me these instructions, the first day I met him, immediately I went to that same place. Immediately I had access to that same consciousness through doing a simple shift of awareness. And it felt like the same as after a 10-day meditation retreat, but it was less than 10 minutes.
Excellent. So is that where you landed as sort of your contemplative practice home?
Yes. So that kind of direct practice is what I kept playing with. I went back to the United States and actually ended up helping form the New York Insight Meditation Center and was one of the first teachers of Vipassana Insight Meditation there, while I was practicing this other combination of what eventually I called Sutra Mahamudra, which is a tradition of building on the mindfulness or Vipassana tradition and then integrating this direct recognition and gradual unfolding. So meeting some other non-dual traditions as well from Advaita Vedanta, but primarily studying with the sons of this first teacher, and their names are Sokni Rinpoche and Mingyur Rinpoche. And eventually, after 10 years, Mingyur Rinpoche asked me to begin teaching in this tradition of Sutra Mahamudra. So I started at some point almost like letting awareness show me the way and almost show me ways to help other people access this in a more contemporary, more felt sense, direct way. And that's kind of what I've been doing for the last 10, 15 years.
So for folks who've been listening to this episode who are more secular, sciencey minded folks like me, if you've stuck with us so far, you might be a little surprised to hear that a strong theme in your book, Loch, is on science. And that's interwoven throughout. And why does that play a part here? What's the value that you see in that?
Yes. Well, I mean, I immediately was interested because my first strong experience was related to my own psychological condition. So I was in this, strong period of grief, and the kind of shift in consciousness had an immediate effect on my body, my emotions, my mental state, my sense of self, my sense of relating to others, my energy. So I knew there was some psychological, physical, physiological brain changes that were going on. And so I continued to combine meditation and psychology in my training, doing psychotherapy training, working in psychiatric hospitals, outpatient, inpatient, and private practice. And then the field of psychology and the field of meditation studies started both kind of at the same time to begin to use neuroscience as a way to be able to study both of these, important traditions, especially with the advent of the fMRI machine, which could look a little more closely at the internal workings of the brain. So I became interested from psychology and from meditation, and have, started making friends with people, some of whom Judd Brewer and Richie Davidson and others who were studying mindfulness and compassion and meditation states. And it started to really correspond to exactly what I was experiencing. that this was, this wasn't a escape from reality, but it really brought, a real aliveness and a full humanity. But there was a huge difference between just psychological growth and adding this new meditation and kind of secular awakening. And it seemed that science was able to, a dialogue and be part of this journey.
Yeah, let's open that up a little bit, this secular awakening concept. You've mentioned that as something we might talk about today. Tell us what you mean by that.
Yes. So some sense that there is that, originally meditation from many traditions, the Hindu and then, Buddha, the goal was relief of suffering, but it wasn't just relief of stress. It wasn't just relief of anxiety or physical symptoms. It was relief of those. And then it was a relief of another kind of suffering, which is kind of a self-perpetuating suffering that seems to be about a kind of self-referential identity that's created in our minds and starts a perpetual sense of dissatisfaction and leads to craving and fear that's on all the time. And that in some ways that is what it seems that level of relief of suffering is what's called awakening. So not just dealing with kind of preliminary practices or initial practices of calming the body and mind and then focusing attention and then, working with right livelihood and right speech as kind of psychological, ethical foundation. But then the core of what it seems like these meditation masters were talking about is don't stop there. There's another level of suffering that can be relieved through stepping out of this small separate sense of self and discovering this awake awareness that's already aware and includes your thoughts, feelings, and sensations. And when that becomes the new ground or base, it's like it's a new operating system eventually from which you're responding rather than reacting. And that is an additional dimension of consciousness that Western psychology doesn't really describe or go as far as. So it seems like that's what I mean by awakening. It's what I call the human being lineage. It's a common consciousness. There's nothing religious or even spiritual required. It's another dimension of our natural total consciousness that can be accessed, that's here, that seems to be obscured or faster moving thoughts and stronger emotions are kind of dominating our identity. And when we can learn to step out of that kind of small center that's created by this looping pattern of thinking, there is this calm, clear nature of mind, this awareness that seems spacious and yet embodied, that becomes more the foundation and that feels also interconnected with everyone and everything. And it's very similar to that flow state of very high functioning. So it's not like it's required that you leave the world in order to go into a samadhi state or a withdrawal or a retreat. That actually in this kind of awakening, you really can be more fully human.
So let's tie that secular awakening with this concept of open-hearted awareness. And what you mean by that, how does that differ from bare attention?
So there, in the Tibetan system, there, they have this big ritual and energy practices, but they're also very precise in their distinguishing states of consciousness. So they talk about objectless shamatha, which would be equivalent to bare attention, which is kind of a looking from a mindful witness, not at just the contents, but at just resting from a mindful witness. And what this is actually is realizing that the mindful witness is still a point of view. It's still a location within your mind, and the practice of shifting into this awake awareness first before open heart awareness is actually to turn your awareness around or open it up as if it looks through the meditator, and the meditator relaxes or opens, and then what's discovered is an awareness that's aware without your help, that is behind and within and all around, and has already been aware without you trying to be aware, but you've just kind of untied the knot of trying to locate yourself in one point of view, either in your as a thinker or as a meditator. And so that's kind of the difference, in a simple sense, of the difference between bare attention and awake awareness. And then that awake awareness starts as kind of a pure awareness. It's almost as if it's timeless, boundless, contentless. And then when that is the ground and includes your thoughts, feelings, and sensations from within, so it's almost like you're mindfully aware, not from above or outside of your thoughts, but you're actually aware of your thoughts from within your thoughts while also feeling open and spacious. So that's the felt sense difference. There's a few neuroscience experiments that kind of show the difference in your brain. So when they do one-pointed shamatha, one part of the default mode network is actually repressed and another part is on, and that's why it keeps you calm, because you have your task mode part of your brain on and your internal observation is kind of offline. And in this awareness of awareness meditation, both internal and external are on, so you feel like you're equally inside and out. You feel like you're simultaneously able to be aware of what's going on within you and without effortfully micromanaging any of the contents. It's as if you've kind of found this effortless awareness that's a capability of us, of we human beings, but we haven't known how to know it. And so then open-hearted awareness is almost the stage when this awake awareness is embodied, and then it's like a combination of a feeling of total acceptance and transcendence, and the feeling of being very inclusive and welcoming. So there seems to be almost a natural loving kindness or compassion that's often called ultimate level compassion, that's sometimes called basic goodness or bodhicitta prajna. It's kind of an intelligence that sees everything as itself or part of itself, or that there's a loving, unconditionally loving, non-discriminating quality of love, which it is naturally discovered rather than trying to intentionally do a loving kindness practice. You shift into this dimension of consciousness, and that's how you see. That's how you feel. So that's the kind of quality of open-hearted awareness. I was just at a talk last night by Richie Davidson, who's a famous research scientist, and he talked about studying some of these advanced practitioners, and he found that when they did awareness of awareness practice, there was this what's called high phase gamma synchrony, which just means that there's kind of an alert, calm throughout the brain, and the brain is every part of the brain is on, and yet there's a certain synchrony to not one side dominating. And then he asked them to do kind of this open-hearted awareness practice after doing awareness of awareness, and it actually made the synchrony 20% more. It gave it even more of a balanced gamma quality, and they reported a feeling of not only freedom and well-being, but a kind of love and compassion. So it's really almost the next natural stage of human development that's possible.
Let's shift a little bit to the Open Hearted Awareness Institute. What's done there? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, this is a nonprofit organization that I formed when I was doing some work with some teenagers, teaching them meditation. And since then, I've expanded to do some work with some researchers and to offer classes, retreats, and supported my book in writing out kind of a manual to try to help people who are really either beginners or have done other types of meditation or other types of practice to access this human capacity of, awakeness and open-heartedness. So it's not just a kind of escape or a peace, but that the open-heartedness kind of leads to a natural compassion and compassionate activity. So living in New York City, it just is a kind of a natural flow that there's always this, give and take. People are learning, then they're going and teaching. That people are working with originally people who were involved in 9/11 and families there, and now a lot of teenagers and others who are in need of basic support. But it's amazing how these short glimpse practices, people who have a hard time concentrating or doing kind of one-pointed meditation can shift into this feeling of flow very easily. So that's a lot of the work that the Institute does.
It must be really nice to work with kids and see shifts in behavior from when you start working with them to when they've had a little practice under their belts and they start to get it.
Yeah, it's quite remarkable, and you really see they just come alive and their whole, they're so enthusiastic and grateful for it. Yeah.
Our guest today has been Loch Kelly. You can find out more about his work, and I'll be linking the Open Hearted Awareness Institute on the episode page for this episode, and the book as well will also be available there. Click on that link to go to Amazon. Loch, thank you so much for being here.
Ted, it's great to talk to you.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to hear more about something you've heard in today's podcast, please come visit the SBA website at secularbuddhism.org, and you'll find an entire webpage devoted to this and every episode. Discussion about this episode can be found on the episode page itself, along with show notes. Sound editing, mixing, and mastering provided by the generosity of Anthony Dominello of StructureFromSound.com. The music for The Secular Buddhist is used by permission from John Kaizen Neptune's CD, Steps in Time. Additional music is provided courtesy of Monty Levinson of Taihei Shakuhachi and Rodrigo Rodriguez. Their websites are linked on the SBA site on the About Podcast Music page. Until next time, remember, every moment you have a choice. Make it the best you can. See you next time on The Secular Buddhist.